A couple of months back, we did a TTM tackle on asking the question why more adults don't play cricket. And we had a really good response from that. One of the responses was from Ben Wilson, who actually has been running a campaign, Save Village Cricket, which I guess a lot of cricket people can relate to. Ben, welcome to the 212th Men. Nice to have you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate the chance to have a chat with you, really.
Yeah. So if I can start, Ben, I guess the immediate question in everyone's hands is, what's the overall aim of, I guess, Save Village Cricket, which is quite self-explanatory, I guess. And where did this all start, and where did it come about?
Yeah, so it started. I played cricket for a little club in Hertfordshire called Bayford, or it's Bayford and Hertford Nondescript, which is the full name. Been going since '52. And we got to the first sort of game of the season, and we had to cancel both our league games because we didn't have enough players. So we wrote, and people may have seen or read, an open letter around the issues that we are facing. And this wasn't a criticism of things that are going on at league level or at club level. It was saying, we're 70 years old, we're a small little village club, we are struggling. How can we get out of this, and what are others doing? And from that, it sort of stemmed this sort of social media campaign to really promote the plight of clubs and village cricket and recreational cricket clubs across the country, try and advocate and try and engage with stakeholders to understand why and what can sort of happen to change the status quo. And thirdly, really, to take action, and I'll talk about that in a bit, around how can we get guys like you, for example, back into playing cricket, not just watching cricket, or engaging with your local clubs, really. So I'll talk about that sort of pilot initiative, and that's in partnership with a couple of people later on. But really, that's how it stemmed. And literally just put it out on social media, and we're in September, and we've got, 1,500 followers, engaged quite a lot with the cricket Twitter community, got talking to a lot of clubs, key stakeholders, leagues, various people like that, really to just try and understand why cricket is struggling at the club level.
And in terms of those key stakeholders, kind of who are the most influential in driving this forward, do you think?
So what we've spoken to the kind of the club conferences, the national club conference. We've got some meetings and discussions with, I'm in Hertfordshire, so the cricket development board there, with a view to trying to understand why things are struggling. So we've spoken to sort of the Hertfordshire League. I've spoken to development sort of boards across the country. We've spoken to Cornwall as a good example. We've had a lot of conversations with clubs locally, but also reaching out nationally to understand whether it's just us or whether this is happening to lots of clubs. And actually what we found is this has almost resonated with people in cricket clubs across the country. We never set out to do what it's turned into. It was just to promote the plight of Bayford and see if we can get a few more players. And we quickly realised that actually this is a widespread issue and something that needs tackling here.
And in terms of kind of, we did a pod a month or so ago around adult participation, and my experience when I was playing cricket was you'd usually have about a few 15 to 18-year-olds, you'd have their dads, and then you'd have one or two uni students or something propping up the team kind of thing. And there was a kind of a big gap of participation between that 20 to 35-year-old age. Particularly, I played at second team level, and that was kind of a non-existent kind of demographic. Is that a similar demographic you've seen in terms of responses?
I think that you get youngsters that are just joining the game. So and this isn't a criticism of the ECB, but the ECB have clearly decided to focus their efforts on youth cricket, which is absolutely fine. So you've got, and I know the cricket Twitter community there's massive debate over the 100, but it's aimed at youngsters or people who don't really engage in cricket, and it's for them. Now, those people may go and do Dynamos All-Stars or go and join a club. And you see some of them coming into club cricket. So at the level I play at, you do see 13, 14, 15-year-olds You then have the traditional sort of the older generation who have played all their life and continue to play, and some sort of I'd say 25 to 35, 40-year-olds, with a few returning to cricket. You probably don't get as many sort of 18, 19-year-olds. We've especially found, and from speaking to people now, is that COVID brought some people back into the game, but you've got that generation of 20 to 28-year-olds who have got festivals, weddings, birthdays, who have sort of drifted away. If you have children, then it is a challenge to convince your partner to say, look, I'm going to play 18 Saturdays, so you can could you look after the children while you do that? And you have to have a partner who is just sort of engaged in the club. And that's something we've tried to do, is trying to get a family feel, try and get people at the club, say, look, it is children friendly, bring partners up and try and create that kind of family feel. But we are seeing that there is a real dearth of new adults coming into the game. And that is a real problem just now, but also 3, 4, 5 years down the line, really.
Yeah. And how much do you think, Ben, if I can ask, the social side of a cricket club? Because you see a lot of clubs, especially where we are, is they lend their hand to social occasions. So this is obviously where friends can meet. Kind of that bit of a pub culture towards it. Well, how hard is it to sort of strike the balance between activities that will include obviously socialising with your mates after playing cricket, to trying to bring in all of those sort of different stakeholders, if you like, at the club, or, people of interest?
I think cricket clubs, like any sports club, it is a community, and you have a community of people coming together. So this year we've been lucky that we've only survived and had 2 teams because other clubs have loaned us players who aren't playing at their club. Now, that's great, and that's really important that clubs collaborate, because ultimately we want to see, and Save Village Cricket is about making sure people can play cricket when they want, in a way that they want to. So if you're not getting a game at your club because actually they've got too many players, there are other clubs where you can go and help out for a week. The biggest issue with that is clubs struggle to then build a community. So I played a game where we had 7 or 8 players from another club and 3 from our club. Now, people were turning up to the game and I didn't know whether they were playing for us, whether it was the opposition. That's quite hard. Now, we are a sociable club and we are very open, very accessible, willing to really do anything to allow people to enjoy playing. So we gave everyone a game. The opening batsman from the club, he got 0. He then came and bowled despite not being bowled, because the game allowed us to do that. But it is hard when you've got 12, 13, 14 people at the club, then to try and bring people and build that community. And I think it's really important that if you get a group of people who want to come and play together, that's really good. So we had a group of 24-year-olds who wanted to play together, but of course they've now gone off and done other things. So you get that, but they often don't want to play on their own. So you might get them all playing or no one plays. And that's a big issue.
I think while we touch on issues, one of the biggest responses we got is that cricket's obviously a really hard game. And if you're not playing well, it can be quite a lonely game and it can be quite difficult to enjoy. Obviously, that's compounded by the initial startup cost, I guess, to playing the game with regards to the equipment. Cricket is, Bot would constantly refer to the 5-a-side model, where you can pay £5, you can rock up with friends, they can play for an hour and they're done. If you want to play cricket in the formats, a first and second team with a corky or the harder cricket ball, you have to invest in pads and gloves and helmets and bats, and you're looking at way in excess of over £200, before you've even got off the ground. Has there been anything that that Save Village Cricket has done to try and look at ways in that could be more accessible? Is it playing with like a softball approach, a quick cricket approach, or is there any ideas you've come up with in that regard?
Yeah, so and I'll talk about how this links to what we're looking to do sort of next year, really. We got in touch, I came across the Googly Fund, which was set up, a small charity set up to promote friendly cricket. And they tried a model in London where it was to try and bring 2 sets of primary school parents who know each other together to play a game of cricket. Now, we took that model in conversation with them, and did a family day. So we invited 2 primary schools as well as a number of other people from the community, men, women and children, to play a game of softball pairs cricket, just to try and say, look, come along on a Sunday, we're going to have a barbecue, cricket tea, bars open, come and try cricket. And we did it for a couple of hours, and we got about 20, 25 people come up to play, with a view that you hope that some of them may come and want to play formal cricket. So we've taken that model, and in partnership with the Googly Fund and a sort of member of our club from the University of Westminster, have refined that model and reached out to the cricketing community. And we are going to pilot this model across the country with 10 clubs to see what works, what doesn't work. Do you have to have softball? Could it be hardball? Is the primary school model? It's all club centered. So we're asking clubs to drive the engagement with the local community, to bring people in, with a view to creating a model that could be replicated nationally. Yeah. So it is about saying, look, yes, you may not want to play league cricket on a Saturday. You may want to play cricket on a friendly cricket on a Sunday. Actually, you may want to just come and play a game of softball cricket on a Wednesday night. That's fine, because actually you're still playing cricket. You don't have to be suddenly, I want to play cricket, I'm playing every Saturday. Yeah. Cricket needs to be flexible and accessible. And I don't think it is, it doesn't think as much outside the box as it should do. So people playing football, the five-a-side model in football is great. You play with your mates, it's an hour. Cricket needs the equivalent of that so that people can come along and have a game of cricket. Last Man Standing tried to do it, but it was quite London centered and didn't really take off. But you need different entry points for people. So yes, cost is a massive prohibitor, but clubs, communal kit, donating kit, let's get people playing in a way that they feel comfortable to do so.
And is the ultimate aim that you get a kind of bit of a trickle down effect, that if you get enough people on a Wednesday night playing that softball, that you get them on a Saturday? Is that what we're ultimately going for?
I think the plan is to introduce people to the joys of playing cricket. So you may, what we got is quite a few parents whose kids are sort of 9, 10, 11, who they're now playing cricket. And the mums and dads are going, well, I'm watching so much cricket. Actually, I played at school. I want to get involved. So come and try cricket. Come and have a game of cricket. If you enjoy it, then clubs offer you that entry point into playing regular cricket or netting or whatever is needed to try and encourage you into the game. And I think the league format as is quite inflexible. Leagues tend to be quite sort of regimented in the way they want to do things. And actually what we're saying is, let's get people playing cricket. And if people enjoy it, they may want to come and play more, whether it's a game on a friendly hardball game on a Sunday or games on a Saturday. But ultimately, clubs need to be trying to get adults back into the game, because ultimately clubs are going to die because people are just not interested in playing cricket for whatever reason. And we've got to try and find a way to get them interested in playing.
And I think it's really important that you strike that balance, isn't it? Because we've seen the North, things like Taverners Leagues, where it's almost like, yes, it's fun, but it's very built around obviously having just a laugh. And there's, I guess sometimes the competitiveness can sometimes, if that isn't there, that can almost in some ways detract people from taking it up more seriously, because there's no, do you see what I mean? There has to be something that makes it where people want to do it again, not just once to show out. There's got to be some competitive layer to it. Do you see what I mean there?
Yeah. So when we did our pilot, the way we did the pairs is that we'd often maybe have a husband bowling to the wife and a wife bowling to the husband. Yeah. You'd create that. The idea of the primary school model is that you probably have competition between the two sort of primary school sets of parents. So there is a competitive element. Yeah. And I think that's quite important. But in the same way, league cricket is almost too competitive. So you can be in a team where you may bat at 11, you may field, you may not bowl. And especially with youngsters coming through, or you get to sort of 16, 17, if you're not getting a game on a Saturday, why would you come back?
Yeah.
Because actually, you might as well go and do something else. Now, there's other things people find, go to the pub or whatever they want to do, see their mates. But ultimately, you've got to encourage them to play. So league cricket is great, but you've got to have, especially at the lower levels, you've got to say, look, we're going to give everyone a game, even if it does mean you concede a few more, or you go for a few more. Whatever happens, you've got to get everyone a game, because that's quite key. And I think clubs get very welded to success is winning at all costs, and that then drives people away from the game.
And that, you talked about a loan system earlier in the conversation. Was that happening within a league, or is that separate to a league? How does that work?
So our league allows loans at a certain lower level, and there's some leagues I think that don't, or there's some rules around flexibility. Now, clubs are quite, as you can imagine, clubs are very, look, we want to keep our players. And actually, I think that's the wrong attitude. The attitude should be that if you've got 5 people not playing cricket this weekend, let's get them a game of cricket, even if it's at another club.
Yeah.
And don't worry that they're going to run off and join the other club. Actually get them playing, because the key thing is that if they're not playing for 3 or 4 weeks, they go and find something else to do. So the league allow it, but the league don't facilitate it. So that we set up a WhatsApp group. It takes a lot of reaching out on Twitter to say, look, who's got players, we've got some local teams. You build those connections, but leagues need to be driving this and saying, look, let's make it as easy as possible. You have to register the players for a loan, for example. So you have to go online, register them all. Actually, at a certain level, does it really matter if someone's coming in? Just if someone rocks up. I saw a great story where the guy turned up with his Uber driver, and the Uber driver then parked his Uber and then played a game of cricket with him because he was short. Now, you couldn't do that with a registration. You have to get date of birth and things. It's just got to be easy to get people playing cricket if they want to.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it's whether more leagues around the country are actually doing that, because it sounds like that could be a solution to a lot of the things we're seeing. For the first time, I mean, when I watched my dad growing up, there was always the second teams were so competitive. They were good enough to nowadays to be first teams, and so many players missed out. But I've seen more in recent times. It's sad, really. Twitter announcements that games have been called off, and in recent times, first team games, particularly perhaps midweek T20 games where perhaps work commitments are coming in, or work-life balance kind of thing is interfering there. So it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, we've seen more, I think, across our league and across other leagues, more games conceded this year than ever. And that's partially because clubs may have a pool of 30 players, but people aren't playing regularly every week. So they may play half the games. So for half the games, you're struggling. We had 1 week when we selected between 30 players. We've had other weeks where we've had 9, 10. So you can see it's really difficult to manage, and it takes people hours to try and get games on. And I think we did a little bit of, we were working with the cricket conference, they did a survey, worked out that the cost, if approximately every club will have to fold a game across the season. And if you take the sort of match fees or whatever, the cost of that is about £1.5 million, or approximately. Now, that's a huge amount of money going into club cricket that just isn't, because games aren't going ahead. Now, we made it completely free for everyone to play, to try and remove any barrier and to say, look, come along. There's no subs, no match fees. And whether it's made a difference, I'm not sure. But at least it's allowed people to sort of dip in and out as they wish, really.
And I suppose coming on from that, what is the future of the initiative? What are you planning over next year, next summer? How far do you want to take this?
Yeah, I think the first thing is this pilot, because what we want to do is, and my colleague for the sort of guy at the club from University of Westminster is going to formally evaluate it. So the idea is to say, look, this model works, or these are things that clubs need to think about. And then the idea is to take that to stakeholders, ECB, and say, look, great, you're investing in youth cricket. It's brilliant. Let's get people coming through. But if clubs die, the opportunity for them to continue to play cricket just doesn't exist. Or you'll be left with sort of big town clubs, and village clubs will go to the wayside. So is there money to invest in allowing clubs to do this and to roll this out nationally. So that's a big sort of goal of ours, but really to try and keep advocating for village and recreational cricket clubs and raise awareness. Really, I think we're keen to build partnerships. There's an idea of a Save Village cricket team who we might try and play against the Metronomes, who have set up a lovely charitable side. So
we've seen that.
We're in discussion whether that we can get a game on to try and get some village cricketers from across social media and together to have a game. We've got some interesting plans, but this is really only the start. And it really needs that. And hopefully, it's been useful, because we're trying to say, look, if people need to get games on, retweeting and various things like that. But it's more than that. It's about advocacy, awareness, but also action, really.
And collaboration as well. Have you seen this progress further from the south? I mean, have you managed to see a ripple effect towards the Midlands and the north, or has it mainly been a local traction that you've seen?
I think we've started quite locally in terms of the action, in terms of the building partnerships. I think what Save Village has done has reached a national audience. So the idea of the pilot is going to be taking place at clubs across the country. So we've got some teams in the north, deep in the south, Norfolk, in the east, Midlands, basically trying to make sure that we can see, does this work? But also making sure it's accessible for everyone. So you guys obviously aren't playing at the moment, or haven't played. I'm interested to know what would drive you back, or actually what would be interesting for you to get you back into playing some form of cricket.
I think so. I'm the closest to have played recently. I think time for me is that 50 overs, second 11, 50 overs, 100 overs on a Saturday. I just couldn't give that. And I also think there is a little bit of a story I told on the podcast recently was it was a Tuesday. I was off with a friend was off, and we decided we were going to have a net. It was a nice sunny day. We drove around to 3 local cricket clubs that we'd played for between the two of us throughout our youth. And all 3 said, no, sorry, you can't have a net. You're not a member. You have to come to training. And we were saying, yeah, but we don't want to come to training until we've had a net, because we just want to kind of get ourselves back into it. And it's those kind of, as a sport, particularly at the local level, do we build barriers to entry that really don't need to be there? It's 2 25-year-old lads. You've seen the faces around the club before. They just want to have a net. The groundsman's there. What's the worst that can happen, really? And I think that is an issue for the sport at times.
That, for me, and I think we've discussed this quite at length internally, cricket clubs are a community asset and should be promoted as such. Now, it takes a lot to have a cricket square to upkeep, so it needs to be used. So nets should be available if people want to come in. If youngsters want to come and have a net, or you're running around with your mates in the school holidays and you want to have a net, brilliant. Just find your local club, and clubs should open up and be widely accessible. See, that to me is something that if you'd had a net, you may say, oh, I quite fancy a game. Yeah. And maybe 50 overs isn't right, but maybe you go and play a T20 somewhere.
Yeah. What's the thing? Yeah.
Turn up. But cricket clubs need to understand that they're a community asset and open themselves up to the community rather than putting barriers saying, sorry, you can't come and play. And for 3 clubs to do it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, really.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's the fact that it's such a hard game, and with me not playing since my mid-teens or late teens, I'd obviously be utterly useless the first couple of times I'm coming back. And you kind of don't want to jump straight into the fire with this. It's like we referred to earlier in this podcast, that you want that kind of practice, that's beyond the net. You want a bit of game time, perhaps, that isn't a 50-over match where you sprung into it. So opportunities to play a shorter, more accessible form of cricket before you jump into competitive, traditional formats of cricket, for me, would be the biggest thing, the biggest incentive to playing again.
Yeah, I think we had I won't mention him by name because he may watch this. We had an Aussie guy who turned up and hadn't played since school, but his kids are playing, and he started off and he struggled to say. By the end of it, he had a chance of opening the batting, scored sort of 30 odd. So the opportunity to progress, but we're quite an open club in terms of we gave him, he got a great opportunity, had some nets, he came along, enjoyed it, and then he get a chance to open the batting. So I do agree with you. It is saying, look, if suddenly you're going to come on and you get naught and you think, well, what's the point in this?
Yeah.
It's about having a chance to go and play cricket again, and then saying, well, come and have a T20. It doesn't matter if you get out.
Yeah.
With our pairs game, for example, we didn't do outs. It was -5 or 10
Yeah,
runs.
like under 11 cricket, yeah.
Yeah, you gave everyone 5 overs or whatever it was, because actually you just get people enjoying it and saying, no, I've hit a 4, hit a 6, bring the boundaries in, make it quite accessible, really.
It's such a challenge for the sport around facilities, I think, because when I think if I was down at the pub with my friends and we all decided we want to have a game of football, we can start a WhatsApp chat and we can go and rent a football pitch, five-a-side pitch anywhere in the country within 10 minutes of having that conversation. We've had similar conversations in the pub around cricket of, should we try and get a cricket match together? We've not played all of those for ages. Yeah. And then you think, how would you get the facilities that it isn't just a park field? And that could sound a bit snooty. Well, why don't you just go and play on a park field? But I suppose the quality of facilities often empowers the quality of the game and then the enjoyment of it. And it is such a challenge for the sport.
It's probably the hardest sport to get back into once you've left it, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And facilities are quite key. And that's where clubs need to be proactive. So that the idea of this model compared to, and this is where it's been refined, rather than getting 2 groups of friends together and have to find a club, let's get clubs to say, well, look, come and play a game of cricket here. And clubs need to be saying, look, we've got pitches available. No one's playing on. Yes, it requires some form of, obviously, you've got to set the pitch up, but clubs should be open to say, look, if people want to come and have a game of cricket, come and have a game of cricket, and we just roll you or use the old wicket from last week and we cut it and off you go here. I think that's where cricket has another barrier to entry because the facilities are so high. But if facilities aren't being used and cricket clubs are dying, then the facilities will go out of action. So there was I think it's a club, Brearmore, which I think is down in Hampshire, which has been going. They've had cricket there for hundreds of years, and they've now had to fold because of various sort of participation.
History, yeah.
Now that ground will become just a park or whatever it becomes, and then you lose another cricket pitch. So that's quite important, is to make sure that clubs recognise their community assets are reaching out, but also available for hire and use here. And we've had county sort of under 12s, 11 county games. We've got a vet side that comes and uses it. I'm in discussions with someone to have a memorial game. So we said, look, come and have it at Bayford. All these things are things that clubs should be thinking about. And perhaps they either don't have time, the resources, or just a bit insular. But I think most clubs are open to trying different things. But I don't think anyone really has said, look, let's really go and drive this. And I've heard quite a lot from clubs that have done really innovative, interesting things. And I think we need more of that, more sharing of, look, this works for me. What about your club? Have you tried this? That's quite important. And that's where the kind of social media aspect can be really good here.
Yeah, I think just to finish on that, on social media, the plans always for this interview, and it's been wonderful to speak to you, Ben, is to continue that conversation where so many people got interacted, and we can share this video and people can listen to your thoughts. It gives such a broader explanation of what Save Village Cricket is all about. Is there anything you'd like to sort of finish on to sort of, project that to that audience?
I think the important thing is, look, we're going into winter period. This is the time where clubs will start to think about what your plans are for next year, really, and saying, look, if there are issues around participation, get in touch with us. There might be some more funding available for clubs to pilot this. But I think we're also interested to hear about what works for others, because actually your club, you guys are in Bolton, we're in Hertfordshire. There'll be clubs up and down the country who are following Save Village Cricket. We want to share good practice because it's really important that people learn from each other. So what works for one club may be perfect for another club, but if no one knows about it, it's really difficult. So I think we're going into a sort of long winter period. That first game is a long way away now, and I already miss the cricket season. But now's the time for clubs to really get together and say, look, what are our issues? How can we help solve? And I think for some of the key stakeholders to recognise that there are issues in club cricket. I love the investment in youth cricket, and that's brilliant. But we've got to focus also
Maintain it further
on cricket clubs, because cricket clubs in general are at risk of dying, really.
Well, I think just to finally thank you, obviously, for coming on. It for what you say, Ben, is obviously coming from the heart, and I think a lot of people resonate with that, and it gives the cause itself such that aura of obviously of genuine care. And I think that the more people like yourself that can come together across the cricket community can mean that village cricket does prolong and does prosper for many, many years and many generations. So thank you very much for coming on to the Two Talk for Men Cricket podcast.
No, perfect. Thanks for having me.
Yes.